Hello everyone, welcome back to my channel. My name's Christina and I cover things that I find interesting, mostly government corruption and underreported news. And so I have some things I wanted to share today. We're going to look at what might have been an FBI frame job in the Proud Boys seditious conspiracy trial. But I also have some other things to share as well, just about the latest with what they've been up to, basically. Okay, so let's go ahead and get into it. There's this thread from Julie Kelly from American Greatness. She says, bombshell motion filed in the Proud Boys trial. Defense accuses Biden DOJ of, quote, outrageous government misconduct, unquote, for withholding critical information related to a document central to the DOJ case against 5 accused of, quote, unquote, seditious conspiracy. The seditionists are inside the House. So this is the motion. This is in the United States of America versus Dominic Pezzola. And this is his motion for mistrial and objection and motion to strike for outrageous government misconduct. Defendant Dominic Pezzola, by his undersigned counsel, respectfully demands a declaration of mistrial or, in the alternative, objects and requests that this court strike Government's Exhibit 528-1 and associated evidence on the grounds of government misconduct. It appears that the government itself is the author of the most incriminating and damning document in this case, which was mysteriously sent at government request to Proud Boy leader Enrique Tarrio immediately prior to J6 in order to frame or implicate Tarrio in a government-created scheme to storm buildings around the Capitol. This is incredible because it mirrors the Whitmer thing, but even more. As such, Exhibit 528-1 and the government's efforts to frame or smear defendants with it constitutes outrageous government conduct. That is amazing. Samuel Arns, a former State Department and Special Operations official, drafted, this was the so-called Manifesto. He drafted a document called 1776 Returns. That document was used as key evidence in the Proud Boys seditious conspiracy trial. He just happened to share it with Enrique Tarrio's lady friend, and she just happened to give it to Tarrio. Now that is linking to a Politico article that was very interesting. DOJ and FBI convincing jury the doc is a creation of the Proud Boys when it clearly was not. During the afternoon session of trial on Thursday, February 9, federal prosecutors used Special Agent Dubrowski to introduce telegram exchanges between defendant Enrique Tarrio and erstwhile romantic interest Erica. Oh my goodness. At one point around December 29, 2020, just prior to J6, Erica sent Tarrio a telegram message with an attachment entitled, quote, 1776 Returns, unquote. The attachment was a PDF file describing plans to, quote, storm the Winter Palace, unquote, a reference to the Russian Revolution of 1917. During Special Agent Dabrowski's chilling testimony, Assistant U.S. Attorney Connor Moreau took lengths to emphasize segments of the document describing a plan to lay siege to Capitol Hill by strategically occupying most of the congressional office spaces around the Capitol. Jurors were informed of this written plan to fill buildings with patriots and were left to think it was a plan of Tarrio's or co-defendants. This farce of a trial continues under Judge Tim Kelly, a Trump appointee. last week, he allowed DOJ to introduce as evidence a clip of Trump mentioning Proud Boys during a September 2020 debate that had nothing to do with J6. He is invested in guilty verdicts. According to the Politico article, Ms. Flores, this is the romantic interest, also gave an interview to the January 6th committee. And Ms. Flores reportedly testified Arms was the author of the entirety of the 1776 returns, and that this FBI and CIA member or associate asked her to share it with Tarrio. If true, this means that the most damning document in this trial was authored by the intelligence community. What a surprise. Someone, quote unquote, groomed by the FBI itself. And the CIA and FBI asset requested Tarrio's close friend, lady friend, to share the document with Tarrio just prior to J6. That is insane. And it's truly remarkable because it is so similar to the things that were outrageous that occurred in the Whitmer case. I start to be like, oh, wow, I can't believe this. This is shocking. But I'm at the point now where, like, this is no longer shocking. This is either entrapment or outrageous government conduct or both, equally improper. It is a Brady violation because DOJ must surely have known these revelations prior to before putting Agent Dabrowski on the stand February 9th to introduce the evidence. One cannot expect decency from indecent prosecutors and judges. This is Whitmer fednapping on steroids. I think she is correct. Outrageous government conduct is conduct, quote, so outrageous, due process principles would absolutely bar the government from invoking judicial process to obtain a conviction, U.S. v. Russell. Here's the government's conduct plainly brings into question the fundamental fairness of this trial and shocks the universal sense of justice mandated by the due process clause of the Fifth Amendment. It runs counter to the, quote, decencies of civilized conduct for the government to literally plant the most damning document in its case in the very inbox of the defendant. Oh my God. The government should not be allowed to then utilize the evidentiary fruits of its actions. Yes, exactly. Just wild stuff there, guys. Unsurprising. Have another thread here. This one regarding the Oath Keepers. Now, for people who are unfamiliar with this, let's just talk about what we know about the Fed involvement in J6. Well, we know that Joe Biggs and Enrique Tarrio themselves were, quote, longtime government informants. So there's that. We know that the FBI had confidential human sources in the Kansas City chapter of the Proud Boys, so they're infiltrated there as well. Now we have the another government asset giving this manifesto to the defendant, the guy that they're charging for having created that manifesto. So it's like, wow, that's amazing. Then we know for the Oath Keepers that the vice president of the Oath Keepers was an FBI informant. He was called by the defendants to testify at the Oath Keepers seditious conspiracy trial, and he had a heart attack the day before he was set to testify. So moving on, just to give some background there. This is from Steve Baker. In this first photo, Oath Keeper Ken Harrelson can be seen holding protesters back from Capitol Police Officer Libra Dunn. Dunn was highly agitated and carrying an M4 rifle. Harrelson and other Oath Keepers took up a de-escalating posture between Dunn and the more hostile protesters. So it looks like they were protecting a Capitol Police officer. This defensive action by Oath Keepers was captured by multiple cameras. In Officer Libra Dunn's first FBI interview, he confirmed this event, as evidenced in the initial January 6th committee report. The Oath Keepers advised Dunn they would help keep the protesters from the Lower West Terrace area. Dunn advised he allowed them to stand in front of him to help keep the protesters from getting down the stairs. Despite ample video evidence corroborating Officer Dunn's May 21 FBI interview, someone compelled Officer Dunn to change his story before his second FBI interview in August. In that subsequent interview and under oath before the January 6th committee, and also in the Oath Keeper's first trial, Officer Dunn perjured himself by saying the scenes captured on those steps near the rotunda never happened, and that others who, quote, looked and dressed like the Oath Keepers had formed that defensive line down in the crypt. And there is a Rumble video here that has that. You can watch it yourself. I'll include all of the sources in the video description. Officer Dunn also changed his initial FBI statement to say that it was he who was calming down the Oath Keepers. This again contradicts his first FBI interview, in which Dunn stated that it was he who was distressed when he came into contact with Harrelson and the Oath Keepers. Only moments before that last photo showing Officer Dunn's first encounter with Harrelson, Dunn had to be calmed down by one of his superior officers, again corroborating his first statement about being quote-unquote distressed.
That's good. Okay, now, so, or we can do vice versa. You feed me.
Get the fuck out of here! Get the fuck out of here! You're hurting us! You're hurting us! I don't know how fast it is. A minute to go. And then after we get everybody over.
You and I. That's good.
Okay, so unfortunately for Harrelson and the Oath Keepers, the D.C. jury believed Officer Dunn's testimony in spite of contrary video evidence. Dunn had already been hyped as a hometown celebrity hero when the evidence shows exactly the opposite. Unfortunately for Officer Dunn, there are more trials coming and more videos to be released, either as evidence or by the new House committee releasing all 14,000 hours. We will all ultimately see that Dunn's second FBI statement was a lie. Harrelson's attorney, Brad Grayer, gave Officer Dunn the opportunity to set the record straight while he was on the witness stand in the Oath Keeper's trial and admit he may have misremembered due to the psychological stress of the event. He didn't take it. I'm offering Officer Dunn once again the opportunity to be a real hero. Get out in front of the hurt that is coming your way if you don't. Set the record straight about Ken Harrelson and those others that stood between you and the hostile protesters. Officer Dunn, you really didn't think you could keep this under wraps forever. Capitol Police whistleblowers are coming forward, and that CCTV video will eventually be released. Wow. Very interesting indeed. Now, this is in reference to what we just read earlier. Julie Kelly is reporting evidence has been presented at a J6 trial that proves the FBI wrote the 1776 Returns Manifesto with instructions to storm the Winter Palace and delivered it to Enrique Tarrio. Biden's DOJ presented it as if it was authored by Tarrio and or another Proud Boy and used it as evidence at trial to convict him of sedition, when in fact it was the product of FBI/CIA asset Samuel Arns, former State Department Special Operations official. Then we have, this one is a little older, and I think everybody's aware of this by now, but the feds targeting Catholics. Now, this document I found to be interesting because there's some things mentioned that are very telling. So this is, internal use only, don't disseminate externally. Open source reporting and FBI investigations have noted a growing overlap between the far-right WN movement and RTCs, Roman Traditional Catholics. Illustrative of this has been the increasing collaboration of the far-right Catholic media outlet Church Militant and its activist wing, the Resistance Network, with the America First / Groyper movement. This is in FBI documents. They're talking about a Church Militant and the Groyper. Like, this is ridiculous. The ongoing convergence of the far-right WN movement and RTCs was further demonstrated through the increase in hostility toward abortion rights advocates on social media sites in the run-up to and aftermath of the Dobbs v. Jackson Women's Health Organization decision that overturned Roe versus Wade. Look at how the FBI words that. Abortion rights advocates. Another way to see it is pro-murder advocates. right? But like, okay. Much of the interaction between far-right WNs and RTCs takes place online, and adherents of RTCs and other far-right WN groups frequently share language and symbolism, such as crusader references or those discourses. This is the first FBI Richmond domain product to focus on the interest of the RMVEs, racially motivated violent extremists. That's something the FBI has been pushing lately in the RTC movement. A search of FBI databases indicated this is also the first FBI finished intelligence product to specifically address this environmental variable. I want to know how many FBI databases there are. What's the criteria for being put in one? FBI Richmond assesses RMVE interest in RTCs is likely to increase over the next 12 to 24 months in the run-up to the next general election cycle, complicating the overall RMVE threat picture while also creating new opportunities for mitigation efforts. The assessment is made in light of ongoing polarization characterizing the U.S. political environment and the probability the policy issues of mutual interest to RMVEs and RTC adherents will remain in the public spotlight, catalyzing events in which RMVEs and RTC adherents might have common cause include legislation or judicial decisions in areas such as abortion rights, immigration, affirmative action, and LGBTQ protections. During this same 12 to 24 month period, the overall RTC community is likely to remain relatively stable or show modest growth based on potential disaffection with mainline Catholic churches on social issues in the aforementioned areas, providing RMVEs a persistent Catholic-oriented base with which to interact. Ultimately, there may be limits to the level of engagement between RTCs and other groups. For example, many RTCs consider other forms of Christianity to be heretical, and an overemphasis on white that may be off-putting to RTCs of different ethnicities and countries of origin. Conversely, deep-seated anti-Catholicism remains a characteristic of many FRWNs. Nonetheless, the current trend of the RMVE interest in RTC ideology provides new opportunities to mitigate the threat through outreach to trad Cath parishes and the development of sources with placement in churches. The FBI has informants in Catholic churches. And then down here they talk about Nick Fuentes, alt-right movement. Okay. Literally named in an FBI document. Unreal. Then we have this thread from Booth here. Jesse Trentadue's proposed findings of fact and conclusions of law from his FOIA litigation provide perhaps the best overview of the FBI's Byzantine filing system I've ever seen. An FBI FOIA requester who reads this will know exactly where to direct them to search. Okay, so I encourage you guys to read this thread. He shows how the FBI makes it so that they basically don't have to respond to FOIA requests. Like, they've never responded to mine. And if they do, they'll give you something small. But that's a very good thread and a good story. Then we have from Ken Silva, does the FBI have spies in Congress? Yeah, we do that. We have manuals on that, but you can't have them because of national security. Yes. House Republicans vow to pull no punches, investigating the FBI this session of Congress. The Bureau may be monitoring them in return. This is according to attorney Jesse Trentadue, who about a decade ago uncovered the FBI's sensitive informant program. He said the Bureau uses it to embed informants in the media, congressional offices, churches, defense teams, and other sensitive institutions. Trentadue never found direct evidence of FBI informants operating in Congress, but that's because a federal court struck down his lawsuit seeking records about such activity in 2015, nearly 8 years later. Trentadue told Headline USA that he hopes the newly formed House Select Subcommittee to investigate the weaponization of the federal government will resume what his lawsuit started. Doing so would be in Congress's best interest, he said. Trentadue first caught wind of the sensitive informant program in 2011 while preparing for a separate lawsuit. His friend and fellow investigator Roger Charles had discovered an FBI memo showing a journalist at NBC News was doubling as a federal informant. The journalist, whose name is not disclosed in the document labeled secret, not only cooperated but provided the identity of a confidential source according to the FBI memo. A possible breach of journalistic ethics if he or she did not have the source's permission, the Center for Public Integrity wrote in April 2011 about the filing. While the story moved through the news cycle quickly with little impact, it prompted Trentadue to file records requests with the FBI to see, hey, does the FBI have other informants in the media and maybe in congressional offices, courts, churches, other government agencies, and even the White House? Imagine, you work at the White House, you also double as a federal informant. I thought they'd come back and say we would never do that because that would be illegal and unconstitutional. He said, instead they came back and they said, yeah, we do that. We have manuals on how to infiltrate, the White House or whatever, but you can't have them because of national security. Trentadue filed a FOIA lawsuit over the matter in 2012, seeking unredacted copies of the FBI Domestic Investigations and Operations Guide, the FBI Confidential Human Source Validation Standards Manual, the FBI Confidential Human Source Policy Manual, and Implementation Guide. After 2 years in litigation, the FBI moved for a summary judgment in April 2014, arguing that it should be allowed to exercise FOIA's NatSec exemptions to keep the manual secret. Included with the FBI's motion was a sworn declaration from Eric Velez-Villar, the assistant director of the FBI's Directorate of Intelligence at the time, who told the court Trentadue's lawsuit threatened to disclose critical tools used by the FBI in its investigations and intelligence gathering efforts. The head of the CIA's litigation support unit, Martha Lutz, also submitted a sworn statement telling the court disclosing the FBI manuals could compromise CIA sources. That is insane. Trentadue opposed the FBI's motion for summary judgment, and two parties argued at a November 2014 hearing. After reviewing the unredacted manuals in private, Judge Kimball said FBI could keep the manuals secret. Kimball noted government agencies are entitled to considerable deference when they exercise NatSec exemptions. While some might defend the FBI's sensitive informant program as necessary for NatSec, Trentadue said the records he's uncovered, such as the FBI memo revealing its informant at ABC News, shows the Bureau has far overstepped its boundaries. Yes, exactly. This isn't the case of the FBI investigating corruption. Trentadue said the Bureau is recruiting spies in an effort to infiltrate and influence 100%. And to end it on a positive note, Howie Carr, a rare salute to the Boston FBI for refusing J6 and proper investigations of citizens. The Boston office finally got something right. I salute them for doing so. The above is a sentence I never dreamed I would be writing, but there's a first time for everything, and this is it. This unanticipated turn of events unfolded this week during a congressional hearing under the new Republican majority. A former FBI intelligence analyst from Boston testified that after the J6 disturbances, the Boston office adamantly refused to conduct improper investigations on Americans whose only crime was or might have been being a supporter of President Trump. Okay, so I think we'll leave it there. That's the latest of what's going on in some of these cases that involve the FBI, and just some of the latest things the FBI is doing, and maybe they've been doing for a long time, like infiltrating Catholic churches and investigating YouTube personalities and bizarre things like that. It's something that is really important that we continue to watch for, we continue to pay attention to, because these agencies have tremendous power. They have massive budgets. They have internal incentivizations built inside of them. And there is no real transparency, oversight, or accountability. So they pretty much just run wild. And I think that gives people an air of arrogance, right? Where they start doing things they know that they're not legally allowed to do, but they think that, well, nothing's going to happen to me anyways. So they do these things. And then if they get away with it another time, that further emboldens them to continue to do things like, entrapment, framing people, planting evidence, as we've heard from them in the Whitmer case. So it just is very important that we, at this moment in time, while we have things like the weaponization committee going on, that we focus on this stuff and get this information out there so that it becomes common knowledge within the American people. They need to understand what the federal government is doing with their tax dollars. Anyways, I'm interested to hear what you guys think about this. Is this surprising to you? Or do you feel this is just sort of more of the same? Let me know in the comments below. I hope everybody has a good night.